And we're back with Blitz, soon to be renamed. We're going to unveil that name next week. But I am Izac with Fun Football Podcast and co-host of Blitz. We've got awesome guests here and my dad. But before we get going, Med, my co-host and buddy, how are you doing, dude?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm just living an American dream right now in the state of patriotism that we got to exude yesterday. So
nice.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week for sure. That's for sure. And obviously, host of Shots. Are you? What are you guys doing this week with on Thursday? Tomorrow?
We got a full slate going on tomorrow. We'll be doing a little buy and sell. One of the questions that we'll be having is Anthony Richardson a NFL starting quarterback? We will be also talking a little bit about Dennis Allen, of course, getting canned. The fact that I called him the first person that I thought was going to be canned this year as a head coach. Shea kind of beat him to the punch. Not exactly something to celebrate, but it is what it is. We will also be doing some predictions with the Lions and trying to remember who they're playing. We'll be Lions and Texans. Sorry,
Texans. I actually haven't looked at the Week 10 slate yet. Yeah. I start my prep on that tomorrow.
But the Steelers and Commanders and a few other teams. Also looking at the Alabama LSU game that's coming up.
Very cool. And then I got my dad here to add some context. We're going to tell our story of how we started fantasy football. Dad, how you doing really quick?
I'm doing all right. Just a little tired, but thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining from work, man. I appreciate you. Seriously. I know you've had a busy day.
No problem.
You got called like 4 times while we were talking earlier. I'm sorry, man. Seriously. I appreciate you. I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks. I'll be in Arizona a little over 2 weeks. All right.
Yeah.
And we got Yeah, that's going to be great. And we got Larry Schechter, Scott King, who I want to do another show with Med. Med wasn't available for that one. He was one of my favorite guests, and he highly, highly recommended you. He's like, go talk to Larry. And I'm really, this would have happened sooner, Larry, but 3 weeks ago today, my wife was in a car wreck, and it's been a really rough 3 weeks. We probably would have gotten this done sooner, but I appreciate you being patient, and thank you for joining us. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you, Larry.
No problem with the wait. How's your wife doing okay?
She just got news today. It's going to be over 6 months before she's back to work, maybe. And the doctor said she might not get 100% back. We don't know yet. So that was really discouraging because she's only 29. It was a really, really gnarly wreck. They were T-boned. Wow. I haven't told the story on this show yet. I told on the other one. So she was driving. I'll do this quick. She was driving on a 2-way highway. So this is her. And it wasn't from the other side. It wasn't head on. She was stopping to turn left. And the guy from behind, being impatient, was passing cars and on the left. And as she was turning, because she waited this way, she was turning onto the street and got T-boned from behind. My stepdaughter, her daughter was in the car with her. She's only 5. Thank God she was okay, like completely okay. But my wife, the impact hit her like in the front of the car. It was a Ford Focus and a truck hit it. And it was in the front of the car and it smashed her leg. It was, I don't know if you actively watch football still, I'm guessing yes, but it was the same type of injury in the same break, even the same direction as Aiden Hutchinson. She broke it like it was just the opposite direction. It was to the right instead of left. So her tibia and fibula snapped. The bone was coming out in her leg. And that's the thing that's going to be, it's going to take the most time to heal. She had a broken wrist too and some ribs and a lot of swelling. She's still in a lot of pain, but she's here. It's just been a life changer, So that's why like last week I was like, I don't think I did my Friday show, but I wasn't she was still at the rehab spot last week, but she's home. And the best thing, Larry, Med, and my dad, is that she made it home for, she fought like crazy to make it home for trick-or-treating and was in a scooter, but we had a Halloween we'll never forget. So that was pretty cool. So yeah. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm sorry that we didn't do it last week, but I'm here. I'm ready to go. And that's life stuff right there for everybody because we hadn't said this show. It's been a crazy 3 weeks, that's for sure. But all right. So Larry, before we get going with all this funness, can you please tell people about your book and about you? The floor is yours, sir.
All right. Well, I've played fantasy sports for 30 some years. and I know some of the people that got the league started. Some of the people that were like pioneers in the business, and yet I haven't known.
You try to pull it up? Yeah, I got you. I got you.
How this
Go
all
ahead.
started. Like I look around at the fantasy sports industry, and I look at, like, some people had ideas years ago for games, and now it's turned into this worldwide craze with millions and millions of people playing all over the world, everything from
Mhm.
fantasy football to fantasy cricket, fantasy Iditarod, fantasy wakeboarding. And I looked and I said, how did this all happen? And nobody has ever written a book about the history of fantasy sports. Nobody knows how it happens. Some people have some ideas, but that's why I got the idea for the book. So I started out. It was a little over 2 years ago. I'm going to write the history of fantasy sports. Who did what happened when, tell the whole story. As I started researching and I did massive research. I interviewed dozens and dozens of people. It ended up being a full-time job for 18 months. I had no idea what I was getting into. But when I started, I would hear stories or read stories that were really interesting. Like, oh my God, this is fascinating. Or, oh my God, this is so freaking funny. Or, oh my God, this is bringing me to tears, this story. And so I realized, if I just write the history of fantasy sports, I'll get the job done, but it'll also come off as a pretty boring research paper. But instead, I'm going to tell the stories that I'm hearing about the people and what they did that are fascinating, and that will get the job done with the history, but it'll also be more interesting instead of like a boring research paper. And that's how it turned out. And it turned out better than I ever could have imagined. If you go to Amazon, that's where the most reviews are. People say it's fascinating, it's easy to read, they love it. The reviews are fantastic. And I knew it was going to be great as I got into it. I heard these stories like, oh my God, this book is going to be great. Because I said it was 18 months. I thought I could knock it out in 3 or 4 months. And it turned into this job that, like, it was a pain in the ass. All this work is so long. But I kept hearing these stories like, this is going to be great. This is going to be great. This is going to be great. I got to finish this.
Yeah, and taking on writing a book that basically covers the entire history of fantasy sports. I mean, it's just one of those things where you kind of look at it and you're like, okay, well, most of us just really play one or two sports, usually like fantasy football or fantasy baseball. You went all the way back to like the Stratomatic and everything that you covered in the first thing. And I was like, okay, I didn't expect this. I haven't been able to get all the way through as much of the book that I wanted to. But from what I've read so far, it was very fascinating how you were able to actually pull up all this knowledge. And, I could only imagine if it takes me 2 to 4 hours easy to do stuff from my show, let alone Blitz as well. I can only imagine, like you said, it took you 8 months. And I was like, sitting there, I was like,
no, 18 months.
18 months?
18 months.
Oh, yeah,
18 months.
18 months, like full time.
Year and a half.
That is
dedication.
That's
so,
impressive.
That was, between the research, researching, Googling article after article after article, talking, interviewing dozens and dozens of people, mostly over Zoom, and then of course writing everything, and then editing. But yeah, it was, and I'm when I was interviewing people, most of it I'm asking people about stuff that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. And most people can't remember what they had for lunch yesterday, let alone something happened years ago. Yeah, me too. I mean, what did I have for dinner an hour ago? I don't know.
It would have taken me a minute to remember dinner 2 hours ago.
And I would get conflicting information. One person would say one thing, and somebody would say something different about the same event. And so a lot of it, I was like, had to be a detective and try to figure out, what's really true. And like I might be, and sometimes watching myself back on the Zoom, I would record the Zoom so I could then watch it back and write down what I needed. Sometimes when I was watching it back, I felt like I was a lawyer doing a deposition or an investigator. I'm like, well, Izac, you just told me X, Y, and Z, but in an article 20 years ago, you said ABC. Were you lying now or were you lying then? But I would usually go with what they said in an article 20 years ago because now they can't remember.
It's funny. I was just reading it. I've not finished it either, but I'm absolutely gonna. It's been a long week, but a lot of family stuff. But I've really enjoyed it. And one of the things I liked about it the most is I almost went for journalism, and I was a newspaper editor in high school and college. And I remember the level of work that it took just to write like a little sports or entertainment article, and the number of interviews and the time, even after I'd done it for, I think I did it for like 6 years, and the amount of time it took even out like in my last year of doing it. So right, and that was sometimes for an article. Like the longest one I did was like I did a half-page spread once, and that took several. I mean, that took me like, honestly, I think the whole work. My dad remembers all my time editing my page. That would be hours. I'd sit one night. I stayed there till I think 11 o'clock, and he had to pick me up. I think he remembers that in high school. I was an entertainment editor, so the level of work that took for half a page.
Yeah.
Kudos to you, man. That takes serious love for fantasy sports, for wanting to do this. And after what happened in your personal life, man, I mean, I don't know you that well yet or anything, but that takes some serious heart. Seriously.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so Med was talking about Stratomatic. Like, yeah, I went back to the very beginning, like precursors of fantasy sports. Then, how did fantasy football start? How did fantasy football spread? Same for fantasy baseball. Then the first publications, magazines, books, first radio shows, TV shows, websites, the first statistics services, like the whole thing. Then, Fantasy Sports Trade Association, legal issues, everything through more modern, like daily fantasy sports. And worldwide expansion. So it covers the whole thing. And when I started researching, like as far as like Stratomatic is concerned, I thought, some people say Stratomatic or APA, games like precursors of fantasy sports, and I, to me, maybe not so much, because the difference between those and what I would call modern fantasy sports is games like APA and Stratomatic are based on professional athletes' real statistics, but it's for prior years. It's, whereas fantasy sports is the upcoming year, so you don't know what's going to happen. You think Christian McCaffrey is going to have a great year. He probably will, but you never know. And this year, of course, he got hurt. Whereas like Stratomatic is, it's based on what the players did last year. But the thing is, so when I started, I thought, well, I'll probably just mention Stratomatic, Apple were kind of like precursors, probably 2 or 3 paragraphs. When I started researching, I was like, oh my God, there's so much interesting information about like Stratomatic and APA. It's like incredible. So I, it's like most of the first chapter is about those. You got people who've been playing in these leagues since college, like for, Stratomatic leagues, APA leagues going for 50 years, keeping college friends together, that sort of thing. You got a guy in Pennsylvania was in an APA baseball league, and after many years in the league, he got ALS. And so everybody thought he's going to have to stop playing. His wife said, if you want to keep playing, I'll do whatever I have to do so you can keep playing APA. So she would go to the games with him. She'd roll the dice, make the moves for him. He'd tell her what to do. And after doing this for like 3 years, he got to the point with his ALS where he could only communicate through a computer and an eye reader, and his wife reading his lips. And in that condition, his team came from 2 runs behind in extra innings to win his first ever APA World Series, after being in the league for like 39 years. And everybody started crying. And Stratomatic is like a continuing theme throughout the book, because it influenced so many people in fantasy sports positions in Major League Baseball, played Stratomatic when they were a kid. And like there's a great story about John Miller, the Baltimore Orioles baseball announcer. At one point, they were going to take a flight to the West Coast, and Bobby Bonilla said, "Hey, bring your Stratomatic game." And so Cal Ripken walks by, seeing these guys playing Stratomatic, and Cal Ripken's like, "What's this?" And Cal Ripken starts playing, and like it's a great story about Cal Ripken. It really shows Cal Ripken's competitiveness, what he did for that game. So yeah, there's a lot about there's a lot about Stratomatic, and as I said, goes through everything else.
I love it, man. Seriously, that was when I saw that. That was one of the things. I know Matt will pop back in a second. I want to give him a chance to say more about this before we dive in. But this man, yeah, that was one of my favorite things when I saw that, and it made me want to research more in Stratomatic. But one of my other favorite things that you said in the book, there was a lot that I'm enjoying so far, but you made a really good point beyond all the research that you did, which was amazing. But it adds. Hold on, let me add Matt back in. Here we go.
I could have got myself, but thank you.
Oh yeah, it's right. You have. I forgot you have admin access too. One of my favorite things is that how much it adds to the sport that we play. Like I'm in a work league, and that gives everybody something to talk about. And it's not just at work that where it gives us something extra to do. And this is common sense stuff, but how much more love it gives you to the game. And one of my favorite things about reading about is I didn't even, I started in the 90s, so I've done this for over 25 years, which isn't that long compared to some other people that played it, but it's added so much for me with my dad every year for over a quarter century now. And how much it's added to other people's lives. I really appreciate that you've added so much history, because it's my longest standing hobby in my life, and knowing more about the history of it. I love that you wrote it, because like you said, fantasy added something for people. It added something extra. It's like going to, it's your analogy. It's like going to the movies and having popcorn. Fantasy adds more love to the sport, but there was no book about the history of it. So you added something that wasn't out there, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, and that's what the people that I'm writing about in the book, that's the common theme, is these are people, way back when it started, that they liked fantasy, and they would see a need for something that didn't exist, so they would do it. Like for example, Ian Allen and Bruce Taylor were college students at the University of Washington years ago and they got into fantasy football, and they're like, this is great. And Bruce Taylor was given a college an assignment for a course. The assignment was basically come up with some idea for like a product or service or something, and kind of write out a plan of what you would do. And so he got the idea of Fantasy Football Magazine, because it's like there's no information for fantasy football. Let's start a magazine. So that was his idea for the college project, and he got Ian Allen, his friend, to help him. And then after the college project, they were like, you know what? Let's really do this. Let's launch it. So these college students launched a magazine, which became Fantasy Football Index, which is still going now after like 30 years or whatever. It quickly became one of the largest fantasy football magazines. It still is one of the largest fantasy football magazines. And, then when computers started to, become a thing, there were people that, early computer people that would look and say, well, we could do this for fantasy sports. The commissioners take hours and hours every week entering all the lineup changes and doing all the statistics by hand. We can do this new thing called a computer. We can do that a lot more easy. So they started statistics services. And, then, people would write books because no books existed, and game ideas for games, and then daily fantasy sports. So it's like a lot of entrepreneurs who saw a need for something that didn't exist, or maybe it existed, but they thought they could do better. And so there's stories about all these people, like you were talking a while ago about how much work it takes for for some of your articles. Well, there's a guy named Peter Pizarris who started what became Commissioner.com, which is the basis for CBS Sports Commissioner Service, statistics service. Even to this day, it's still the basis for it. And when they launched it, they had very little time. They got the idea for this and thought, this is a great idea, let's do it. But they didn't have a whole lot of time to get the whole thing created. And this guy worked 23-hour days. Him and his partner, Mike, they were in Manhattan in a building that really should have been condemned. Like no hot water, no heat. They would like sleep by their computer, leave the computer on all night and sleep by it because like the only source of heat they had. Occasionally they'd have a mouse run over them. And in these conditions, this guy worked like 23-hour days. And he said, I know you're not going to believe it, but it's true. I really worked literally 23 hours a day, and I would go eat a Whopper for food. And they launched Commissioner.com, which ended up becoming this huge thing. They made millions of dollars. So just like story after story after story about people who did stuff like this.
And, when you're talking about that, a lot of people don't realize is that back in those days, they didn't have the internet. They basically literally would have like little hotlines that they would call in and be like, hey, who's the trade and everything like that. And they literally just played through the mail.
Right.
And I was like, this is unreal. And, it really and truthfully, in some parts of it, I wish that fantasy football was kind of like that today, where you actually have people where you go and actually meet that go see this. I mean, if I remember correctly, the first ever fantasy football league that is still active to today was created over in California, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have any points for yardage. It's regular scoring football, which is just touchdowns, field goals, extra points, and safeties.
Which is what you said you wouldn't do for a while. I kind of want to do one of those. I want to do a reverse fantasy league where the lowest scoring but has snap percentage. That's how you win. I want to do a reverse league one time. I want to see if it'd be any fun. I've never done that. It'd be interesting.
But yeah, there's guys like you kind of said, the story about the gentleman that had ALS and was able to win with his wife. That is heartwarming.
Oh yeah.
I like that. I really like that story. That was my favorite part of the book so far.
Yeah. Well, you probably haven't gotten to the one that mentioned. Well, maybe you have. I don't know. There's a story about a guy who was in the World Trade Center on 9/11 on his honeymoon.
No, I didn't get that yet.
This is an unbelievable story. His honeymoon, he's in the World Trade Center on 9/11, and his story of what happened and how he and his wife got out of that hotel and survived is amazing. I mean, after I interviewed this guy, I was crying. And every time I watched back the Zoom to get the information, I would cry. When I was writing it up, I'd cry. Yeah, unbelievable. And the thing is, it's not in the book just because, oh my God, it's this unbelievable story, has like a gratuitous sex scene in a movie or something. Mm-hmm. It's like it's in the book because this experience directly led to what happened, that he became involved in the fantasy industry, which he still is today. So that's an amazing story. And then there's lots of things that are funny. You got like Lenny Melnick. He and Irwin Zwilling did like the first big fantasy sports radio show, and Irwin owned a box company in Long Island, and the radio station was like 15 minutes from his box company, and 800 numbers weren't very common then, but he had an 800 number for his box company. He wanted to make it available for his radio listeners to be able to call in from wherever toll free. So he would leave his box company. He put call forwarding on the 800 number to their radio station so his listeners could use it. And then after the radio show, he'd drive back to his company and turn off call forwarding. One night he forgot to drive back and turn it off. So the next morning, whatever the morning radio show was, they're getting calls like, Joe from Staten Island, you're on the air. Yeah, where the hell are my boxes?
I like that. Yeah. And the other thing I found really fascinating, I want to get into our story, but the other thing, there was a lot I found interesting already. That's why I'm excited to finish it. And Larry, if you're up for it, after you edit, I'd love to buy a copy and ship it to you to have you sign it. That'd be really cool. If you're down, I'll message you about it later. But the thing that was really interesting and that I hadn't really thought of until I got into it was the guys who started it, and then in different they tried to the rotisserie guys tried to trademark it, but other people just changed the rules and kind of made it their own. So it was really interesting because it was an amazing concept, but look at what it's become today. But now, like you said, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, but it wasn't something that they could just make just their own and keep it their own. That was something that I found really interesting about some of the creators of whichever one you're talking about, football, baseball, whatever. That was kind of that was something I should have anticipated, but I just found really intriguing the more I read about it.
Mm-hmm. The guys who started, who are primarily credited with starting rotisserie baseball, they trademarked the name rotisserie baseball, and they tried to make some money off of it. But people would quickly realize there's really nothing to copyright. There's all you got to do is change the name. That's why it started as rotisserie baseball, and then it turned into fantasy baseball, because people would just change the name so they didn't have to pay these guys a fee for really nothing. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. No, like it wasn't that difficult. So no, man. I got to say, I'm excited to finish it, but the level of work you put into this, and
it's commendable.
It's very commendable. And it's really cool because it's something that so many people do. Like Barack Obama, you said that in the book, he did it as he was, about to become president. But the number of people that play fantasy, and like Med said, he got to do a couple of these this year, but me and my dad in the 90s, we did it in Michigan. We'll get into the full story in a second here, but we did it in the 90s in Michigan on paper. And then in New Mexico, I've done drafts in person. In Arizona, I've done drafts in person. And that was before it really took off with the internet. And seeing how fantasy has transitioned, I've started doing new format leagues this year, and there's new ones being created all the time. So yeah, man, I appreciate that you did this. I really do. And I hope more people read it and go check it out. Seriously, it's absolutely worth it. I'll be dropping a review. I want to finish it, and I'm going to be dropping a review. So yeah.
Everybody who likes fantasy sports will love the book. If you like fantasy sports, you got to read it. So buy it now. If you're busy, buy it now. Read it when you have time. If you can't buy it now, put it on your holiday gift wish list. Even a lot of people who've never played fantasy sports have really liked the book, because it's just not so much about fantasy sports as it is the stories of what these people did.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Well, you ready to hear another story? All right, Dad. You're going to add. This is going to be fun because I feel like you're going to add context. Mom did too, that I never even knew. I forgot. So I remember when I think, Dad, what year did you start? 93, do you think? 92?
I think it was 1993.
Okay, so I was born in 88, so I was 5 years old. And I remember watching my dad play fantasy, and I really wanted to even then, because he raised me on the Green Bay Packers. I remember watching Brett Favre when I was 3 or 4 years old. I don't remember which game it was, but I remember watching him and Jordan when I was a baby. So he raised me on the Packers. We lived in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan by Marquette, is the town that's named Ishpeming. I lived there until the end of the 90s. Sorry, Dad. Now you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, Larry, do you know where the UP is?
Do I know what?
Do you know where the UP is?
A lot of people think it's Canada or Wisconsin.
Sort of. I'm not real,
So it's just like if you know where Green Bay is, it's exactly, where we lived was 2 hours north of Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Yeah, sure.
So it's in the there's an Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So we grew up there until the end of the 90s. So I played up there for a couple of years with them, and I think we continued it even after we lived in Arizona. But anyways, I remember watching my dad do this when I was like 5, and I wanted to play because it looked like so much fun, and I loved football already, and I started studying stats as a 6, 7-year-old in first grade, right after he started. And I wanted to do it, but he was like, no, you need to be a little bit older before you start playing fantasy football. So he wanted me to be a little bit older. So I'll let him jump in a second here, but when my birthday's in April, they lied about my birthday 2 months before. And so I could do a paper route to earn the money. And it was freezing up there, obviously. So this was in February. They lied about my birthday so I could start earning the money early because the draft was in August. So it gave me 6 months to earn tips and do my paper route in the snow and then through the summertime, which was nice. But I worked it for 6 months.
He bought his way in like everybody else.
Yeah. They wanted to be fair about it. What was the entry fee, Dad? Was it 100 or 150?
Oh, it was just 100.
Okay, so the entry fee was 100. And if I'm getting this right, it was a 28-man league, right? 2 divisions of 14 or 2 conferences of 14.
What had happened was we originally started it out to kind of mimic the NFL at the time. So we started an NFC conference. We call it the UPFL, and there were 14 teams. It was a 14-team league, and I believe at the time there were 14 teams in each NFL conference, if I'm remembering right. But
I think that's right.
and then we had the idea that we were going to try to do it very much like the NFL. So we wanted to do a Super Bowl. So my brother lived in the same town that I lived in, right? And he was in the original league. And then, so what we did was we broke off we created an NFC and an AFC, right? And and 14 teams in both leagues with the AFC and the NFC, they played totally different pool of players for the AFC and a different, and the pool of players for the NFC. So they would never play each other until the Super Bowl, and that was week back then. Gosh,
It was probably the last week, right?
it was the last week. I think it was 17.
Yeah.
I don't know if we had 17 back then. Well, anyway,
It was 16 games, I'm pretty sure.
it was
It
the
was the late
first.
90s.
It was the first time that we had put. My brother took over commissioner for the AFC. I took the NFC. Isac's team was in the NFC. He came in. My brother was the commissioner for the AFC, and he ended up in the Super Bowl. And sure enough, if Isac's team didn't end up in the Super Bowl against my brother, right? And it was it was his first league. And the one thing I do remember is that Isac's running back, I to this day, I can't remember who the running back that went out.
It's Tim Batuka.
No, somebody went out, but you picked up Tim Batuka, I believe, off the waiver wire.
Touchdown, Tim.
And he ended up beating my brother in the Super Bowl with a waiver wire running back pickup, and got the money.
Davis.
What did you spend the money on, Izac?
Oh, I think I bought a PlayStation, but there's more to it. My uncle had Terrell Davis and had this awesome team. I think I had Randall Cunningham, but a lot of it was like one like year wonders. And I was only 10 years old, so I just did the best I could. And I studied the stats in the newspaper, and I think we had dial-up at the time, so I would look stuff up then. And I started that year. I bought the Fantasy Football Index. I still buy it this year because it helped me win my first league ever. So I still actually buy it, even though it's fairly outdated, and I get more of my stuff off the internet. But I still buy it as a tradition. I bought it every single year. I don't think I've missed one year buying it.
Fantasy Football Index was our go-to.
Yeah,
it still is for Izac.
Yep. I still buy it. My dad's like, "You bought it again?" I'm like, I have to. It's a tradition. I'm big on traditions and loyalty, and I stuck to it. So, but I beat my uncle. He had Terrell Davis that 98 season that the Broncos, not the season they beat the Packers, but the next year where they beat Atlanta in the Super Bowl. And Terrell Davis, I think he played Miami on Monday Night Football. I can't believe I remember this. And I believe it was either 19 or 29 yards. So he had his worst game of the season, and that was his 2,000-yard season, his MVP year. I believe he won MVP that year. Yeah, and he that was on the Monday Night Football. My uncle needed so many points, and Terrell Davis had his worst game of the season. So I wish Mike was watching this. I should have messaged it to him. But he had his worst game, and I managed to beat my uncle. They brought me, even though it was late December, it was snowy. They brought me flowers and stuff the next day. I got called into there's more to this. I got called into the principal's office thinking I was in trouble, even though I had one detention ever as a kid. So I got called in. I was like, why am I going to the principal's office? And I was freaking out. And they brought me down, and they had brought me like flowers and balloons and stuff to celebrate that I'd won. And yeah, it was pretty cool. Seriously. It was awesome. They brought that. I think my mom had said this. I think she's right. I think I went and bought a PlayStation with the earnings. It was a few hundred. I remember my uncle saw me the next day. Congratulating. He was my dad drove me down to his house, and he was like, "Congrats, Izac, lucky." But No, it was really cool because that was the luckiest thing, and it's something I'm never going to forget for the rest of my life. And I worked my tail off to get there to get it, and I'd wanted to play for like 3 or 4 years, and that was really cool. Seriously, I really
And then you remember,
I enjoyed that a lot. It was fun.
I think what we did for stats was we picked a newspaper that was close, so it was the Milwaukee Sentinel, and we would always use their stats, as commissioners, both Mike and myself, to score the games out on paper. So we would score the games out, and then we would get it on Tuesday for the Monday night game.
Yep.
There weren't Thursday night games back then, so
No, there wasn't, except for Thanksgiving. Yeah, there's nothing. They didn't do any of that. It was just Sunday and Monday.
we could
You
get those.
reminded me of so many stories in the book.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
that's why I was like, this is going to be fun, because the more stories I've read in the book, I was like, this is going to be great, because it was so much fun. Seriously.
Let me quickly tell you like 3 you just reminded me of. Like when you're talking about being, you got called into the principal's office and you thought you were in trouble. Well, now here's the opposite of that. A fellow is Wisconsinite the right word? Greg Ambrosius, who started the first fantasy, he started Fantasy Sports Magazine, and then he started high stakes. He started a high stakes league, the National Fantasy Baseball Championship, National Fantasy Football Championship. Anyway, he was hired by Krause Publications to help write the first fantasy sports magazine. And on his 20th anniversary with Krause, he got the exact day of his 20th anniversary. He got called in to the president's office, or something. I'm not getting this exactly right. I might have the details slightly wrong, but it's not the exact day of 20. He gets called by the president. He's like, "Oh, they're going to acknowledge my 20th anniversary. They're going to give me some kind of present or something." He gets there, and the guy says, "We've sold the company, and we've sold you too." And Greg's like, you can sell a person? He's like, "Yeah, we can."
Wow.
And then and the other one you reminded me of, when you're talking about getting the Monday night game, you had to wait for the Tuesday morning. There's a guy, Bill Pullman, who started one of the first publications. The first fantasy football league he ever got into, when it got to the last week of the season, there was a Sunday night game. He had a running back going, and he needed the running back to get a touchdown, and he would make the playoffs. And if the running back didn't get a touchdown, he misses the playoffs. And it's a Sunday night game, or maybe it was a Monday night game. I forget. It was probably Monday night. They probably didn't even have Sunday night games then. So Monday night game, Tuesday he goes to work, and because you can't get the results. So Tuesday morning he goes to work. He picks up a newspaper outside work, goes into his office building, goes into the bathroom, goes and sits down in the stall. He's flipping through the paper, and he gets to the box score, and he sees this guy scored a touchdown. And he's like, "Yes, yes, yes."
See, that's awesome. I like that.
And he gets up. A minute later, he gets out of the stall, and there are 3 guys standing there staring at him.
That's funny.
Larry, I love that you included those. I really do. You know what's funny is I think my dad let me stay up for most of the Monday night game, but I don't remember, and I might be remembering this wrong. I'm trying to remember as much of the story as I can, but I don't think I knew if I won, and I went to school the next day not knowing. And I think they checked me out a little early, and then my dad, him and his brother have a rivalry. I love it. He drove him by. He's like, "Izac, we're going to brag." So we drove by in the snow, and my uncle chuckled because he thought it was pretty humorous. He's very competitive too, but I think losing to a 10-year-old kind of sucked, but he knew how excited I was about it and that I'd done the paper out for
Yep.
seriously 6 months, and I continued to do it for another year. That was the same year I remember delivering the paper out and finding out it wasn't him. My mom made me go to bed before Jordan shot, and I woke up the next day, game 6, found out that Jordan hit a game winner with 5.6 seconds left. In the Mining Journal, that was the paper that I delivered for, and they're still active to this day. Awesome newspaper too, but so they came and told me I wasn't sure if I'd won. I knew I had a good chance because he was having a terrible game. I can't remember how many points my uncle needed. I think he just needed like 8 or 9. So he either needed like 80 yards or just a touchdown. It wasn't like for Terrell Davis, like you said earlier, it wasn't that much that he needed. This was Terrell Davis's magnum opus. It was his great season. So yeah.
I was the commissioner, and it was a different thing being a commissioner back then, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things we did was we did point spreads, and when people called in on, when they would call in their lineups or call in for a trade, or normally their lineups, they had to call their lineups in by a certain time. I would let them know like what the point spread on the game is, so we would actually put point spreads on the game, right? And Izac was he was a prohibited underdog in that Super Bowl.
My dad does a ranking system every year. He's done it since, and he goes and ranks the teams, all of them. And I think he ranked me like out of 14. I think he ranked me like 13th.
However,
however,
in the Super Bowl, you had lost two of your best starters.
Yeah, I did. I remember that. I don't remember who they were, but yeah.
You had just to pick up a free agent. And in a 14-team league, that's not as easy because there's a lot of players that are gone.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing that I remember too is that doing the draft, it was something that it was as a bigger event. You know what I mean? And for the original, and then years later, we would rent out, or we would ask work to use the conference room, or one year we used the local VFW, and they would allow us to come in at a certain time, and all of the guys would show up, and they had their own little areas, and we had a big bulletin board, and I would run the draft, and it was pretty. There were some very specific rules, right? Guys had to call out their players. If they didn't call out their player in time, they lost their draft pick, and you went to the end of the round. And we had to, and it was very strictly timed. And it was an event, and people just, we got together and we did that. And one of the things, one of our friends from the original league, one of my friends, and Izac knows him, his name is Kurt. He moved.
Oh yeah, we still talk to him.
He moved to New Mexico. After he got his master's in social work, he went to New Mexico, and he called me up and he said, "Tom, I want to start a league down here, the New Mexico, PFL or whatever. I want to start a league, but I need you to come and do the draft for me," right? So for 2 years, we took our vacation in early August and went to New Mexico with the family, and we would do the draft in New Mexico for them as well. So
it was for several years when we lived in Phoenix. We did it for like 5, I think we went for 4 or 5 years. I remember going to Albuquerque, New Mexico in August.
Oh yeah,
we did it several times. It was great.
Right, but when I was talking about when we.
Oh yeah. No, that's true. Yep.
They wanted me to run the draft, because running the draft was kind of a skill, right? It was different.
I got a couple of I got one of the names. I think I might have the other ones, but I had Muhsin Muhammad. I think he played for the Carolina Panthers. He was one of my players that broke out for me. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the other names that I had. It was some guys that like really only came on for one season. It was like guys that you didn't want to draft in 1999, but in 1998 they were great. I think I might have had Rakib Ismail as well. I'm pretty sure I did. Those are 2 of the receivers.
That sounds familiar.
I'm pretty sure those were two of the receivers I had. And then Timbiaka Batuka at running back. And I know I had the quarterback was the only guy you've heard of for more than a season. I'm pretty sure it was Randall Cunningham. So yeah. But my dad's right. I had a couple injuries. So my uncle was super confident he was just gonna destroy me. And then I got lucky. So yeah.
He was pissed. He thought he was gonna get the trophy. Back then they would, everybody would call in their lineups. There wasn't, and it was a rotary phone.
Yeah.
We didn't have a cell phone or anything, so people would be trying to call and be busy. They just keep calling, so I'd be on the phone for an hour straight, just writing lineups down. And the funny thing is trades that was the commissioner's discretion. So you had to be, you had to really be fair, and because
good to the commission.
You certainly couldn't call, 11 people and ask them to vote on a trade. We weren't considering that at the time. So, I'd have one person call and the way that trades worked was owners would talk to each other. And if they agreed on a trade, they'd call it in. They'd both have to call it in to me. And then, we'd have to make a decision. Is it a fair, is it a fair trade or not? And most of the time, so, but,
there are people that have gotten into arguments and lost friendships because they thought trades weren't fair. And
we've had some family stuff happen with that for sure.
One chapter in my book is called Innovative Entrepreneurs. And these are people that came up with, slightly different ideas for certain, one was mock drafting, fantasy sports insurance in case your player gets hurt, like an insurance company, various things. And one of them was like legal disputes. If you think a trade isn't fair, you can, use this company to decide whether it's fair or not for you. Oh. And there are a few people. There's like one guy, I can't remember his name off the top of the head, but it's in the book, where he was like a high-priced attorney who defended clients on murder charges and stuff like that.
Yeah. Interesting. I like that.
And on the side, for fun, he's like, he's like adjudicating fantasy disputes for $10. And he's like, not doing it for the money, doing it because he likes it.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's
the
awesome.
last thing I want to add is that we have a new league. We started a dynasty. We also have an eliminator. I goofed with that today, but it's our first time ever doing an eliminator. And I'm really enjoying it. Me and my dad and Med is in it as well. We all three are eliminated, which stinks, but it's been a really fun league. But we started a dynasty for the first time. Med's not in this one. We're going to probably start a second one next year. I want to get Med in it, and it's a blast. But my dad is the commish of this league, and in honor of that first league, he named it the UPFL for the Upper Peninsula Football League from the 1990s, which was pretty cool. My name then was the Rambling Rugrats, but because I've absolutely fallen in love with the podcasting and almost at a full year on X, but I've just hit a year of doing this show, I decided to name my team name Fun Football Podcast. I retired the other name because I found something new that I love doing about as much as fantasy football, actually, which is this. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to name it for my other love, which is this, other than, family and teaching.
Not Lynn.
So, yeah.
No.
What?
Not Lynn, but this. No.
I said family. I said family.
Lynn's Lightning. Not playing.
No, Lynn's the best. That's my wife's name, Larry. I wouldn't be doing this show if I didn't have her support, and I'm divorced, and I never would have thought it with my ex. So when you find the right person, they'll kind of push you towards things that you love doing. So, yeah. And fantasy started as a kid, and I'm happy to still be doing it. So that's something I'll be doing for the rest of my life for sure.
And definitely in the 90s, the Fantasy Index was our go-to magazine.
Mm-hmm.
That was the go-to.
Yep. Yeah. Ned, you've been on the sideline for too long. I know you got to have some questions. What you got, man?
Oh, no, I got some stories, but one of them is when you were talking about like stuff that happened in y'all's leagues and stuff. Me and my dad started one 15 years ago, and I actually named a trophy after him after he passed away. It's David Smith Cup. And so we got like a little trophy that we sometimes win. And so,
Are
but
you wait, did you win last year?
I did not win last year.
Oh, okay. All right.
I only won one time. I've been in the championship 5 times, but I've only won once. And I actually taught my wife, who actually beat me in the championship one year. I actually taught her how to draft and everything like that. And she drafted a bunch of Packers, which just made it even better. But she was like, she had Jordy Nelson, she had Aaron Jones, she had Aaron Rodgers. I mean, she was stacked, and she did it. But my favorite fantasy football moment was I was playing. It was the first year that we did it. There was only 6 teams, and I had Anquan Bolden, and there was a play where he actually caught a pass behind the line of scrimmage, but they said it was a forward pass, so it only counted for like 8 yards. Well, he had enough yards. If it was a run play, he would get 2 points where he got 1. So at the beginning, I lost. I lost to my brother by 1 point to go to the championship game against my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so a week later, the NFL, like a couple days later, the NFL reversed the decision, said it was a run. So I got the 2 points and then beat my brother to get into the game.
You got to the Super Bowl with a stat correction.
Yeah, with a stat correction. He was like, that ain't right. You know, the game was already over. I was like, Chris, I mean, it is the rules.
It is what it is.
And you know, I was the commish. I upheld it. But
yeah, of course you did.
So Larry, a question for me, and we have these memories about what we got to experience with fantasy football. What is your best memory in fantasy sports that affected you?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I have no idea. My best memory, I don't know. I mean, I've got a few good ones. I mean, I know like a few of my big wins, like on the last day of the season.
Nice.
You know, like really, really close. Like I won, you know, I won the 2002 and 2005 CDM National Championship against, you know, roughly 15,000 teams. So it's kind of a big deal.
That is a huge deal.
Yeah, but the thing is, but the thing is, it's like it's like so close, you know, from first, you know, being first as opposed to being second, third, fifth. It's like so close. It's just kind of like luck, you know, that I finished first instead of being like third or something. And yeah, I remember there's been some like last day of the season, really, really close stuff. Just pull out a win by half a point or something like that. But I don't have one particular memory. I can remember some bad things, like
that's usually what we remember.
Spending a bunch of free agent money on somebody in the first game they get hurt for the rest of the year. I mean, that. You know, there are times where it's like fantasy. I'm never playing this again. This sucks.
I drafted Jordy Nelson, and before the draft was over, he had torn his ACL.
I remember that year.
That sucks. I was so mad. The draft was like 2.5 hours, maybe, a little over that. He had torn his ACL before the draft was over. I was like, all right, this is going to be a good year. I love this. Very cool.
Yeah, the only player I could think of where I regretted it, I thought it was such a smooth move, was when Toby Gerhart went from the Vikings to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I just thought he was going to explode like Adrian Peterson, because when he played for the Vikings, he was pretty damn good, and then when he went to Jacksonville, he pretty much sucked, and it was just like, you know, he was supposed to be the bell cow, he was supposed to be all that, and it just did not happen.
I got one for you, Larry.
Go for it.
Are you going to write any more books? What are your future plans?
I'm not going to write anymore.
Okay. I don't blame you. That's a massive ordeal. I think you're not, but I just wanted to know.
I'll tell you what, I mean, you know, I spent 18 months of full time on this. The thing is, after it was done, I've been spending pretty much full time, you know, getting it published and now trying to promote it. Because if I don't, you know, let people know about it, nobody's going to. So it's kind of like still a full-time job. So I'll be doing this for a long time. And since you just brought up Adrian Peterson, I got to mention this. I know you're a Bears fan. And you brought up Adrian Peterson, so I got to tell you a little thing here. In my book, 300 sub pages about the history of fantasy sports, everything, the entire history of fantasy sports. Why in the hell would I mention Adrian Peterson of the Chicago Bears, not the good Adrian Peterson,
The one from Georgia Southerner,
but the one from the Bears, the backup running back for the Bears? Not only once is he mentioned in the book, he's mentioned twice.
Wow.
That's an interesting little tidbit. The thing is, when I believe, if I remember, if I remember correctly, it was John Hansen, big Sirius XM radio football guy. He one of the first fantasy football shows, they booked Adrian Peterson as a guest, and once they started talking to him, they realized they didn't book the right Adrian Peterson.
I heard about
They
this.
thought they had the Vikings star running back, but they had the backup Bears running back. So that was and then the other time he's mentioned, James Sarah ran one of the first statistic services, websites with like live statistics and stuff. And back then, obviously the technology was new and everything, but it was working pretty well. But one day the system kind of crashed for 45 minutes. The reason it crashed was because the Vikings were playing the Bears, and they had two running backs with the same name in the same game, and their statistics service was not set up to handle that. So it took. So what happened is, this guy Jim Serry ran this company, and they had these live statistics. One of the first live statistics, which was a great thing. But when this problem with Adrian Peterson happened and it stopped working, I got to look this up. I got to read you the exact wording here, because the exact wording is really good. Let me just find this here.
Gave Jason some shine real quick.
Yeah, let's hit. This is where you can find the book, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to hit it again
there
before we end.
Yeah,
it's pretty easy. Once you look up Larry Schechter and the history of fantasy sports, and guys, I'm serious. Like, this is awesome. There's a reason I wanted to bring him on. The first author, but it's a really cool book, and I think this is the most excited I've been about one of these shows in a long time. Honestly, it might have been my most excited because I was going to get to tell the story with my dad and do it with Med, and then bring Larry on. And Scott, Med wasn't there. Seriously, Scott King, man, he was freaking awesome. So he talked to me after the show and during about you so much. I was like, this is going to be great. So yeah, man.
Yes.
I hope people go and buy it. I hope everybody checks it out. Seriously, because the way I see it is, if you're into fantasy football and you're even remotely into history at all, this is for you. Seriously.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's Scott Engel, by the way. You think his Twitter name is Scotty the King, but Scott Engel, who's
Scott Engel. You're right. I'm so used to seeing Scott King. You're right. I'm sorry, Scott Engel. He was great. He was. Yeah. It was really fun. The person I had him on with too, because he was applying. The other guy was applying to. I think it was Sleeper and Rotoballer, and they were having a conversation with that. It was great. So sorry, Larry, your go.
Yeah, so the book's available on Amazon and most booksellers' websites, ebook and paperback. And if you go to Amazon, that's where you see lots of reviews and lots of details of the book. But this other Adrian Peterson story. So here's the story about the 45-minute delay that Jim Serra told me about. So when the delay started, emails started coming from dozens and dozens of his clients. They started with, just to let you know, the stats haven't updated in a few minutes. Then they started getting angry. The stats haven't updated. What's wrong with you people? Eventually, they escalated from, I want a partial refund, to I want a full refund, to I'm going to sue you. After 30 minutes, it was, I'm going to start a class action lawsuit. And then I think you should fire everybody. I hope you get cancer. I hope all your family gets cancer.
Wow.
He got over 1,000 emails, despite telling them he was at the mercy of the statistics service. They didn't care.
Wow.
And that's actually when he knew he couldn't do this anymore. He did, it was actually like the joy and upset of running this company. That was like, it got to be too much, too much stress for him.
Yeah.
And I understand that completely because
Yeah.
when I was commissioner of football of my league for 14 years, the one year I did not take it over was there was one, my dad passed away after our fourth season. And he previously, I consider him like the Vince Lombardi of our league because he won the first two championships. Of course, he beat me in both of those championships, and I won the third one. So, but
so you're
yeah,
like the Dallas Cowboys. That's unfortunate.
no, I actually won one. No, I won one. But it and I remember my lineup from the year I won. But after that, it just, he was my biggest rival. I never beat him. And when we switched it over to like my friends and everything, we're bringing them in, they started wanting to change things. And I was like, guys, I really don't want to change anything. This was something that me and my dad made, and I kind of want to keep it that way. And it got to the point where, they're like, well, why don't you do this? And I'm not a huge fan of PPR leagues. And that's what they wanted to go to. And I was like, look, all right, no problem. If you want that, I'll put this one to rest. You start your own league. So I was pretty defined on what my dad wanted. And, at that point, I was like, this is my memory. This is my memory of my dad. I'm going to keep it with that.
Man, when you say that, it reminds me that our initial scoring system back in the day was a 100-yard rushing game, right? So if somebody had 99 yards, they wouldn't get a point, but if they got 100, they would get 4 points. I don't know, Larry, if you've heard that scoring system.
I've actually heard that before.
I remember how brutal that was because I would have like 98 yards. I'd be so mad.
You had to get 100. I mean, that's
the very first league was just like touchdowns.
Yeah.
And no yards.
Yep.
Oh, like O.J. Simpson would run for 100 yards and get no points. And the guy that vultured the 1-yard touchdown punch would get the 6 points.
Would get the points.
That's brutal. Those guys that come in for touchdowns, you'd be having to strategically draft them.
I actually had a league just like that.
Have you ever heard of Emil Kadlick?
No.
Emil ran some of the biggest fantasy football publications. He's the guy that co-founded the first high stakes league, the World Championship of Fantasy Football. And unfortunately, he passed away not too long ago. But Emil's home league with his friends from Albuquerque, by the way, they had this like touchdown only format, and for years, and like every couple of years, they would meet to discuss the rules. And Emil would be like, hey, how about maybe we add some yardage or point per reception? And they're like, point per reception? What the hell is that? We got the greatest league ever. Touchdowns, greatest league ever. No, and they never changed anything. So he finally gave up trying to get them to change it.
Well, Larry, I'm still in the growing stages, but the one thing I can offer is I've met a lot of people, and I'm going to be throwing your name out there a lot because we can go for a little bit longer, but I don't want to keep Matt up too late. But I don't know what time zone are you in, Larry? I'm sorry.
Where I am, it's like 10. And by the way, speaking of that, I don't know if anybody's noticed me. I've like yawned a few times, and I just want to say for the record, I'm not because I'm bored about this. It's because I was up very late watching election coverage last night.
No, I understand. I actually had to put it down to go to bed because I was I'm getting over a cold, and with all having to the extra. My wife's still in it. She's not walking yet. She's got a walker in a wheelchair, so she can wheel herself to the bathroom. But I'm trying to help as much as I can. So.
Unfortunately, I do have to check out because I have some work to do. I've got to get back into work. So
thanks, Dad. Appreciate it, man.
Larry, it was very nice to meet you and talk with you, and I love the book, and we're gonna read through it. Izac and Med, nice to see you guys.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Dad.
Back to work.
Seriously,
have a good one.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Love you guys.
Love you too.
I'm happy he got to come in for that. That was really cool. Okay, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, anyways, no, Larry, I'm going to be I've got a lot of people I've met that are very fantasy focused, and I think would get an absolute kick out of this. I don't want to keep you too late because I know it's 10 where you both are. It's 9 where I am, and I'm a teacher, and we start school at 7 a.m. But I hope people go read it because
it is a good read.
It's a fun read, and I gotta ask. After you read it, or sorry, after you wrote the whole thing, and now that it's sat for a little bit, what you've added a couple things already, but what stands out to you the most? Like, what's your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway, is well, I mentioned before, most of the people in it, like the entrepreneurs, they saw something that was needed, and they created it or improved on something. And what happened though is after I wrote the book, the manuscript, I sent it to my editor, and my editor, after he read it, he suggested you should have an epilogue, because I
read today, and I'm really happy you did. I really am.
I know you read it because I didn't say, you said before you haven't read the whole thing, but then you made the comment about Barack Obama, and I'm like, okay, he skipped ahead to the epilogue because that's in the epilogue.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah. So I originally ended it on the previous chapter, and the editor said you should write an epilogue. It doesn't need to be long, just something to kind of tie it up. And I thought, like, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. I should do that. So I started thinking, like, okay, what should I write for the epilogue? And when I'm thinking about it, it occurred to me, I had just done what all these other people did. Like you said this before, like I saw a need for something that didn't exist, and I did it. It's like there was never a book about the history of fantasy sports. I saw that, and I did it. It's like, oh my God, I just did what all these people I've been writing about did. I saw a need for something, and I did it. That's pretty cool. But the other thing that really stood out, reflecting on it, is that fantasy sports are freaking great.
Yeah, they really are.
People love it. You got it brings coworkers together, fathers and sons, which we've just talked about here. You got your father and dad, Matt is talking about his dad, mothers and daughters, fathers and daughters. I mean, coworkers, college friends, it brings people together. You got a draft in a fantasy football draft in Las Vegas where you got a plumber sitting next to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and the two of them are talking like they're best buddies, and so it's like, it's great. Fantasy sports are great. That's what really stood out. And the thing about Barack Obama that's funny, that the story about Barack, what I mentioned in the book, Barack Obama played fantasy sports. He played fantasy football while running for president. He played fantasy football. And that's just like a little interesting tidbit that I had. I had some various interesting tidbits. Some of them made it into the book, and some of them didn't. And that was like a little tidbit that I had. I really liked that. I really wanted to get that in somewhere.
I like that you stuck it in.
The thing is, I was not able to get it in anywhere, and I'm like, all right, well, I guess that's just not going to get in the book. But then when the idea about writing an epilogue came up, and I started, thinking about the epilogue and writing the epilogue, is, oh, perfect. This is the perfect spot. I can get it in after all.
And that was well played that you did it with the epilogue too, because I always like to read it. Like, I feel like I didn't spoil anything by reading it, but I just wanted to get it in before this, because I knew I don't want to like deep dive into what's happened here with me the last couple of days. So I read as much of it today as I could, but and I'm a special ed teacher, and this is a grading period week, so I haven't had time at work this week as much either. But I love that you snuck that in, because it was really cool to just catch that, because I'd heard that previously, but it threw it back in my brain, and it was really well played. So I really did. I like that a lot.
Yeah, nice.
And also, I want to say thank you, because doing this show, I almost went for broadcasting when instead of teaching, even though I love teaching, but and that's what I meant, like, this is my second hobby love earlier, Matt, but but we've had a band on, we've had some really cool guests on, and I'm honored that you are our first author on. And I'm really honored that you're adding the story to the book. That is super cool. I can't wait to read that. That's going to be cool because that'll also be like a first for me as well. And I just really appreciate it. Seriously. Thank you. This was awesome.
Right, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Matt, do you have any other questions for him?
No, and also congratulations on being a cancer survivor. I mean, we actually just my wife and I 2 weeks ago we went down to I can't pronounce it
Florida,
correct, but over in Florida. Yeah, I was going to say the town name, but it's like Amelia Island, and it's not that one, but it's off of there. But anyway, we just did Pledge to Pink, which actually does research money into breast cancer. But all in all, man, congratulations on doing that.
Well,
Hopefully
it was actually a heart attack.
Oh, snap.
You were saying that? I was trying to remember. I was like, I feel like it was something. It wasn't that.
Sorry.
People are going to hear this and go, I didn't know Larry had cancer. No.
Sorry.
I first of all, thank you. Thank you.
But thank you for surviving your heart attack. My dad
it was a heart attack and kidney failure. It was a heart attack and kidney failure. But thank you. That was a big enough recovery. That was as good as recovering from cancer, I'm sure.
And to do all this afterwards, you were like, I'm going to accomplish my dream. That man, that's inspiring. That's inspiring, and that's so commendable, dude. I know we just met, but proud of you, and that's awesome. Seriously. So yeah, and I hope more people read the book, and I love that you did the same thing that you were talking about, like you said earlier. You people feel the need, and that was what the whole beginning of the book is about. Is how people saw a need for something, and it's crazy how big it's branched and how fast it grew. Even though people at first some made fun of them, and then other people were like, "Wait, can I get in this league? Can I get the rules?" They were calling in, "Hey, can you tell us the rules?" And some were cool about it, and some were like, "No, we're going to try to keep it." The way it is. But you did the same thing that they did. You were like, somebody needs to tell the story of how this has started, because it's become such a mainstream thing. Like even in Texas where I live, where sports betting isn't legal, fantasy sports is, and it's all over the place. And I think it's just going to continue to grow clearly as the NFL does.
Yeah, and even like Paul Charchian has been in the industry his entire life. And he was the president of the Fantasy Sports Trade Association for 12 years. He read the book, and he's like, I've been in the industry my whole life. I didn't know a lot of this stuff. This was like enlightening.
That's what's really cool about it, is like you added so much context because you did so much work and you went and got the stories. It's like when I told my dad to watch it. It's not the same, but it's like I've watched The Last Stand several times, and all those little stories in the interviews that the guys added after the fact added so much context to that Bulls run. And I know it's a silly analogy, but you did was really cool, because I think the more people that find this are going to they're just going to be in love with it, because it's adding backstory to something that everybody loves. And that's one of my favorite things about it. And I've really enjoyed getting to meet you, man. Seriously. Thank you for staying up with us. This was awesome.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Next time.
Thank you, Med. Med, what you got? So you really quick, let's go around. Med, remind everybody what you got coming up on Thursday.
So Thursday, I will be talking. I'll have my buddy Seth here with Shots from the Sidelines. We'll be talking about some of the past headlines in the last week that have been kind of stirring about in the NFL. We'll be talking some games, predictions, and we'll have a buy or sell on 6 different subjects. So also going to be debuting Standing on Business, which is we'll talk about a team or player that did very well in fantasy football or just in general, and also not a good look, which is the exact opposite. So looking forward to that. Larry, cool. I am sorry that I gave you a different diagnosis than
fine. Everyone's going to be happy to hear I survived cancer.
Hey, I mean, there's no.
Yeah, I'm going to make a prediction. Can I make a fantasy football prediction for this weekend?
Go for it.
You know what? I feel bad. If you guys have a few minutes, we could talk. I wanted to hit some fantasy. Yeah, Larry, what you got?
it may not be this weekend, but sometime between now and the end of the regular season, somebody in the NFL is going to try to imitate Saquon Barkley's backwards hurdle.
The
And
Birtle.
they're going to hurt, and they're going to get hurt.
Yes,
They're not going to do it. They're going to hurt themselves.
I like that prediction. Can I ask you? I have one. If you have a minute, I want to ask you a quick fantasy question. Or you know what? What's before the trade deadline? What is one player that you don't have that you would target in a trade? It can be any position. What's one player that you would love to get on your team? It was something I asked on Twitter.
Oh boy, I don't know.
I mean, I have Jaden Daniels. I have Saquon. I would like to get. I hate to admit this, but I'd actually like to kind of, even though he's had some moments, I'd like to get rid of Marvin Harrison Jr. because he's been rather up and down for the Cardinals, but which has been kind of unfortunate. And I have Jordan Love, and he's kind of tanking my work league because he's been throwing so many pick sixes to, whoever's in the area.
9 straight games he's been throwing a pick.
Marvin Harrison was kind of, there was so much hype for him the first couple of games of the year. Then he's been mediocre.
It's been really up and down. He'll have like 18 or 1, and it's hard to live with that in fantasy because you're. I picked him in the second round. I got caught up in all the hype. My dad in our dynasty is not here, but he picked him in the first round. And this is a fun little fantasy story for him. I'm on 5 in that league, and I was all ticked. My dad can tell you. First year of that league, I've never done dynasty, and now I'm 4-5, and I play him this week, and I'm projected to win. So I'm hoping to. I've never come back from 0-5 to make the playoffs, so it might happen. But and the other thing I did was I stashed Nick Chubb, and I don't know how that's going to work out, but it's been a weird year for fantasy too. How are you? Yeah,
a lot of injuries.
There's been a lot of injuries, and passing's been down. What's your best record in any of your leagues?
Well, honestly, for the first time in like years, I'm not playing full season fantasy.
Oh, okay.
I get that.
Because I was so busy with the book, trying to promote the book, I didn't have time to prepare, and I wasn't going to do it half-assed.
I completely get it because my last year was my first year starting this. Med started previously the year before. He took a few month break after for a minute. Trying to.
I almost did not play this year from anybody. Like literally, It was like pulling teeth to get me to play this year.
I have actually played some daily fantasy for the first time ever.
How do you like it? I've thought about it, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole. Do you like it?
Yeah, well, I like it. There's some good, compared to season long, there's some good things, there's some bad things, but it's fun actually.
That's what I thought too. I'm just debating if I want to gamble it, but I have a coworker who keeps talking to me about underdog, and I'm like, it's taken a lot to restrain myself to not do it. But no, that's very cool. Do you still play other fantasy sports? I'm guessing you still play fantasy baseball. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be, I should be back to season long fantasy football next year.
It's tough when something else takes up all your time. Like my fantasy teams last year was my worst year ever, but it was my first year of this, and I've spent so much time on Twitter trying to grow this thing because I want to make it something.
Well, you were doing 7 shows a night.
Yeah, no, I had 1 week where I did 10 shows.
I was like,
that was a lot. My wife was gone. I did 10 shows in 1 week. I did 3 one day. Yeah, it was crazy. I
won't tell Lynn. I'll be like, look, when you leave, you need to tell, Isaac to chill.
Last time I was a little better. My family goes on cruises with the family, and I missed out on a couple of them because I only have so much time off, Larry. I get 2 weeks off. So, and I get sick, I'm working with kids, so you get sick every month basically. So I've had to miss out on some of them. And when she's gone, I'm like, okay, let's do a show every night. And as fun as these are, they take a lot of energy and preparation. Yeah. Even now, I still, especially for this one, I spend hours of prep usually for each one because I want to come in prepared. So, it was a lot. Even going on other people's shows takes a lot of energy and time, not just the time you're on air. So, but no, man, I seriously appreciate it. Really quick, can you remind everybody, not really quick, you take as much time as you need, remind everybody about your show, where they can find you on Twitter, and Floor is yours,
Where
man.
did you find your book?
Yeah.
Twitter, Larry Schechter, and the book, Amazon. Just if you go to Amazon, look for the history of fantasy sports, Larry Schechter. I mean, you need to put Larry Schechter, but you'll find it. All the reviews are there, all the details. Buy it now or put it on your holiday wish list. Tell everybody you know about it. Everybody. I mean, I wish everybody listening to this, if you like fantasy sports, you're going to love the book. I guarantee it. It's easy to say that, but it's true. And it's not because I'm so great or did something wonderful. It's because all these stories are amazing. And please tell everybody you know who likes fantasy sports, or buy it for everybody in your league for Christmas or something. A guy I know, Eric Kesselman, he got it, and he emailed me after he got it. It's like, I've read 2 chapters so far, and I just bought 3 copies for friends.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
I'm excited to finish it. I'm gonna be sending you some voice messages when I'm done because I'm gonna have more thoughts. And I'd love to have you back on, honestly, after I finish. That'd be a lot of fun.
Finish the book.
Okay. All right,
yeah, no, and folks, I mean, I read a little bit. I mean, Izac could tell you I have 2 jobs and then I do 2 shows, so I'm like stacked. But what I have read so far, I'm in about 5 chapters right now.
That's about where I'm at too, actually.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Like literally, it makes you think. Like I did not like. What was crazy, real quick, Larry, is that there was a guy who actually mentioned a Stratomatic in one of my Twitter conversations, and I was like, really? So you're gonna like our next guest? And it's just really cool that this book, it's going to really be great. Please, by all means, folks, we will put the link.
Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna put it on Twitter in a minute. Once me and Matt get off in a little bit after the show, I'm gonna copy and paste your Amazon link on Twitter for everybody to see. Yep.
And please, by all means, check it out. It's really good. I would give it a 5-star review right now for what I've just read. So,
yep.
Oh yeah, if you got it on Amazon, give me a 5-star and go to Goodreads.
It's funny. It was trying to make me do that earlier. I was like, I want to finish it, but I'll absolutely.
I'm going to say something. I haven't mentioned this to anybody. This is the first time I've ever mentioned this to anybody, but the reviews on Amazon are great. It's like mostly 5 stars, some 4 stars. I think there was 1 3-star, but there's a 2-star.
Well, what do they know?
No. There was a 2-star review. One of the first reviews that came up it was just 2 stars. It was a rating, no review, just a 2-star rating. I'm like, who is this person? Did they even read the book? Like, because they didn't write a review, so it's like, did they even read the book? What do they not like, or is this just somebody who doesn't like me or something?
Yeah, you've done great. You've got almost 40 You've got almost 40 ratings. Over 80% are 5-star. It's at a 4.7 out of 5. That's great. Exactly. But why even do that?
It's like this 2 stars. It's like, did they? Like I said, it's like, did they even read the book, or they don't like me? It's like it's like, what is this? And then there was there was like one other one where it's like, well, they they like they like fantasy books, but not like, the fantasy is a genre, not having nothing to do with fantasy sports. So they're like, oh, this is a fantasy book. It's like, no, it's not a fantasy book. It's about fantasy sports. Like, you should have figured that out before you bought it,
I didn't even see the editorial reviews. I'm reading them right now, and these are great. And impressively informative, exceptional, well-organized, and presented. The history of fantasy sports and the stories of people who made it happen. Of the people who made it happen by Larry Schechter. Simply fascinating read from start to finish. Midwest Book Review. The CBS Sports and Turner Sports one by Mark Mariana is pretty cool. What sets this book apart is its ability to bridge the gap, and this is great, between historical data and the human elements of the fantasy sports community. Schechter brings to life the pioneers, the landmark moments, and the underlying strategies that have defined the genre. This is a must-read that captures the essence of fantasy sports with the reverence and depth it deserves. Well said, seriously. You got another ESPN guy Tristan Cockcroft, ESPN.com senior fantasy sports writer. Larry regales us with colorful accounts, many of them direct from the source. This is a must-read for any passionate fantasy sports fan. Oh, Michael Fabiano, that's cool. Senior fantasy analyst for Sports Illustrated? Larry, the history of fantasy sports is a fun look back at how fantasy sports has grown from its infancy into the absolute monster that it is today. Man, that's glowing, dude. That's awesome.
And also,
you just did something great. You didn't know who Tristan Cockcroft was, but you know who Michael Fabiano is.
Yeah, I think I've heard of Tristan Cockcroft, but yes, I do. Michael Fabiano is. Yes, I do.
I'm going to let him know this. That you're like, Tristan Cockcroft, I don't know who he is. Like, oh, Michael Fabiano. The two of them, they were like the first hires by Scott Engel, I believe, if I got this correct. Scott Engel was at Sportsline, and they were like two of the first fantasy sports writers for Sportsline. And Scott Engel hired them. Scott Engel needed one writer, but they were both so good, he hired both of them. If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure I got this right.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm pretty sure
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Wow. I need to get more background before I bring Scott back on. And maybe you can add some. Yeah. You can add some fill in some gaps there. Very cool. I like it.
You're like oh, Beyonce, yeah, Beyonce, great. Like, and then Ariana Grande, Ariana who?
No, I will always notice Ariana Grande, to be honest.
And then in that scenario, I went to, but that was well played because that's pretty accurate. That's exactly what happened. I was like, oh, there's a name I know. But no, man, those reviews are glowing. There's more too.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it says in the thing, folks, verified purchaser. If 2-star does not have that on there, that means they did not read the book.
Well, that's
exactly. They didn't read it.
It's like,
and we've gotten some clowns on here, and like Mad can tell you, and I'm just like, I don't know you. Like we've had about I don't know. We're at like almost 100 guests now. We've had one bad experience. It happens. So there's always going to be a hater, and the more popular it gets, you're going to have people that hate. But that means you're doing something right because
my first book,
you've got a lot of people that do like it.
My first book had a review, basically said, like, this is the best book ever written on fantasy baseball strategy, just like the best thing written since the Bible. 4 stars. I'm like, if it's the best thing ever.
You're like, did you not click all the way to?
Like, yeah,
did you sneeze when you were submitting it?
Oh, it was an extra little. Drag it a little bit further to 5 stars.
That's why when you see some websites or like on Google or whatever where something's got like 1,000 5-star ratings, like no other ratings, every single one is 5 stars, like 1,000. It's got to be bullshit.
Yeah, they bought and paid for it. It's like some of the some of those businesses they pay for. Because I've actually had some bad experiences in businesses, and I was like, they must have bought those reviews because there's no way they're a 4 or 5-star business. Unfortunately, it is BS. It is BS.
Even if you're a great business, every single one is going to be 5 stars. It's like I said, it's like the guy's like best thing ever written, 4 stars. Like,
the guys ever written.
He didn't say the best thing ever written, but it was some really glowing review. Like, yeah.
Let's think about all the other 5-star books that was written before and after the Bible. I mean, it's the Bible.
I had one last question for you, Larry. If you're cool, I know we're at about an hour and a half. I'm sorry, we always go long with the show, especially when we have great guests like you. How awesome was it winning that contest, the fantasy contest? Can you give some backstory into that a little bit? I got to hear more about that if you're cool with it, if you got a minute.
Well, It was a long time ago, and
Okay.
all I remember is it was, I would say, it's very cool. It was like fun. And winning it the second time was really good, obviously. And I was the first person to ever win it twice. Somebody else won it for a second time also.
And you beat 7,500 teams in 2002 and over 6,000 teams in 2005. Wow.
Something like that. Are you reading that, or is that?
I'm reading it.
Yeah. Okay. Then you got.
I like to have. If I'm gonna, I like to have stuff. I just was pulling numbers out. 7,500 teams, 6,000 teams. That was a lot of teams.
I think I said too many teams before, didn't I? I was thinking of how many teams that company peaked at, but that's not what I wanted.
That is a lot of teams, though, man. That is massively impressive. Seriously.
Well, I mean, you also survived cancer, so I mean, what can you not do?
I'm doing everything. I think for my next trick, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna win a gold medal at the Olympics.
Hey, there you go.
Well played, Matt. That was really good.
I don't know what sport yet. I got to figure out what sport.
Diagnosing people differently. I love it.
Maybe how about the bobsled? You guys want to push me and I'll steer the bobsled?
Hey, I'm all for that.
That would be an experience. That would be something. And also, Larry, you're on our last show that's going to be named this. We're about to rename it to the Cheesy Bear Show. Ned has a pretty cool logo. This is the last episode. We're going to be named Blitz. We've decided to rename it. We haven't been on to announce that yet. This is our first show back in like 3 weeks, because that's right before my wife's car wreck. It was about 3 weeks ago. So this is the last show that we're going to be named this. We're going to rename it to Cheesy Bear, and we're going to have a Packer Bear podcast next week. I'm really excited because the Packers and Bears play the following weekend. So this was really cool last show with this moniker. So yeah, this was really fun. I am Izac with Fun Football. I'll be back Friday night with Bill on my other show. We'll be doing pick'ems. I think it's just going to be me and him. We'll see how of good a mood Bill's in after that amazing Packer Lion game, where Jordan Love decided he needed to gift wrap the Lions some more points in a one-score game. You got to love it. I made a really fun video. I made a before video, Larry, and it was the best thing. It went viral on TikTok for the wrong reasons. And I'm sitting there. I'm out at lunch, waiting for my fast food to come through. Super excited. I'm like, Packers are going to beat the Lions. And I make a video. I post it about an hour and a half before the game. And then the game happens, and it's all daylight in the first video. I'm out in the car. It's bright. I got my Packer gear on. And then I make a video after that terrible game. It's all dark, and my hair is frizzled. I'm very distraught. So, yeah, that Packer Lion game was a little depressing. I wish our new quarterback was not like Brett Favre with the interceptions, but it is what it is. So, Ned enjoyed it thoroughly. Yeah, you loved it.
I mean, you could sit there and talk about Arizona beating the Bears, but I mean, I'm a Bears fan. I'm used to it. So.
You are. This is true. You're used to pain and misery.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The Packer Bears thing, but like Larry, we've joked it's not even a rivalry anymore because the Bears haven't won in this decade. So yeah. But Larry, thank you again, sir. Med, anything else?
No, I'm good.
All right, guys. I'll be back Friday. Med will be here Thursday. You can find me where it's on live on Facebook right now, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Go get Larry's book. It'll be posted. I'm going to post it on Facebook as well. It'll be posted everywhere. And thank you, Larry. We're going to have you on again soon. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.